Hi, this is Swapnil Bharti, and we are here at the Oracle OpenWord conference, and today we have with us George Saab. First of all, thank you for coming to the show. And first of all, tell us, what do you do at Oracle?
Thanks, it's great to be here. So I am the Vice President of Development for the Java Platform Group, and I'm also the Chairperson for the OpenJDK Governing Board.
Excellent. So let's first talk about Java Sen. What's been going on with the latest release that came out?
Yeah, so I think one of the most exciting things is we've now transitioned from the previous release model that we had, where we had a major release every other year, and of course sometimes it ended up being every third or fourth year. And so we're very excited now to be delivering on a 6-month cadence. So JDK 11 just came out, and that was the second of these 6-month releases.
As the releases are more frequent now, do customers face any problem in keeping up with that? How easy it is to upgrade, update, or do you really care or not about that?
Yeah, we care a lot. What we found is that these releases, they have a lot less in them. We actually were doing 6-month releases before, but we didn't have the ability to do changes to the language, the spec, and the APIs. And so basically we've done a bunch of work, some of it our own work on how we're building the releases, but also working with the JCP, the Java Community Process Executive Committee, in order to refine the process that's used for evolving Java specs. And this has meant that we could tremendously reduce the amount of overhead that was entailed. And that really is a result of the fact that all the development we're doing is being done in open source at OpenJDK.
Since you already mentioned OpenJDK, there has been a lot of about discussion around what's the future, what's the home for OpenJDK? Will it be GitHub? So can you talk about the future of OpenJDK?
Yeah, this is actually a really exciting project. It's the most recently created new project at OpenJDK, and it's called Project SCARA. And that's really about testing different kinds of development environments, looking at potentially moving from Mercurial to possibly Git, possibly at GitHub. And so they've done a bunch of work and showed some of a live demo of the project on Monday, which was basically showing the kind of development environment that would be there for people working on the JDK itself. Now, of course, that's a fairly small number of people, but the nice thing is there are so many developers at GitHub that this will make it much easier for them to follow and see what's going on in the ongoing development of OpenJDK.
And what about the governance of OpenJDK? These days we see a lot of projects go to a foundation. Mm-hmm. Have you ever contemplated on that, or you're happy with the home of OpenJDK?
Yeah, so the setup that we have now with the governing board that has both representation from Oracle as well as other companies, and something that the members vote on, we think is working very well. And so, we're happy to see that continue.
Now let's switch gear back to Java for a while.
Yeah.
As we see, we are living in a phase where new technologies pop up on weekly basis, mm-hmm. New paradigms, new buzzwords, sure. Serverless. You can drop cloud and no matter what you talk about. Yeah. So what is Java's relevance in this cloud native world?
Yeah, so I think Java has always been very, very strong in these kinds of environments. Whether it's serverless or whether it's somebody else's server, you're actually a lot of the things that people want to run are Java stacks. And so we put a lot of thought and effort into thinking of things we can do that help make Java work really, really well in those environments. And that's true whether you're running something that is a very small workload that you want to be small, start up quickly, do something quickly and go away, or whether it's something that's maybe doing machine learning with terabytes of data and needs to be able to process those extremely well.
So how is Java being optimized for, let's say, serverless landscape?
Okay. Yeah, so I think one of the exciting things there, this is something that we introduced in JDK 9, we put in place a module system, we modularized the JDK itself, and we gave some tools that will allow you to build a custom runtime that can analyze your application, look at only what your application needs, and exclude everything else. So this allows you to run with something that's a lot smaller. And once you've done that, you can then start to do things like ahead of time optimization, ahead of time compilation, to basically make sure that you have something that comes up very, very quickly and can actually come up already warmed up and ready to go fast. the final thing that we have there is something that actually used to be a closed source feature, but we contributed it to OpenJDK. It's called application class data sharing. So that does something where it takes the class data from your application and possibly libraries, and then basically can build that into a shared image, right? And then that can be shared across multiple instances. So that's a great way of then just memory mapping, having something come up really fast, not paying a lot of overhead if you want to have a bunch of these.
One part of the first question was also about making it easier for people to move.
Right, to update.
Yeah.
And do we care about that? Okay. Yeah, that's something that we care about a lot. I think making the rapid releases, they have a lot less in them. And so basically, they're about the same kind of thing as the 6-month releases we had before. It's just those didn't have the possibility of introducing improvements to the language and the APIs. Now we can do that. We're not going crazy doing that though. We're doing it in small steps and small chunks, basically making people's lives better. And trying to make it easy for them to continue to take advantage of those. The feedback on the 6-month cadence is people understand that it basically is adding something, right? It brings them the ability to get access to new features more quickly. Just as an example, in the JDK 11, we've just introduced support for TLS 1.3. So you want to be able to, as a developer, to take advantage of that right away. You don't have to wait for 18 months or 2 years in order for that to come into a GA release.
Is there any long-term support LTS version, or everything is just 6 months?
Yeah. So in addition to the 6-month releases, about every 3 years, one is designated as a long-term support release, and that means that in the Java community as a whole, we've all kind of agreed that these will be a particular release that's supported for many years. So as an example, Oracle provides 8 years of support for those LTS releases, and what that means is you can get a stream of just stability, security, and performance improvements without new features that potentially disrupt going in. And that can give a lot of organizations plenty of time to migrate from an older version forward to a newer version, while still getting access to the latest 6-month release with new features in it.
Perfect, awesome. Now let's just talk about some trend and future. What are the use cases that excite you the most? By excite, I don't mean that you have the dominance in the market, but you are excited about the use case and you want to capture that.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm very excited about is Java's ability to handle very, very large amounts of data. I think we're seeing this a lot with things like machine learning, right? Where basically people want the ability to have terabyte heaps and be able to process that very, very quickly and have garbage collection work, but without being intrusive into the processing. So there, we're excited to put a new garbage collector into JDK 11, which is called ZGC or Zeta GC. And so that is aimed exactly at this kind of use case. It basically allows you to set, down to a 10 millisecond pause time, but running on a multi-terabyte heap.
And when you talk about machine learning and big data, I always think about IoT devices, collecting all the data.
Sure.
So where is Java in the IoT world? And I'm not talking about the server side.
Yeah, no, Java is used widely on the edge, as you know. We even, in fact, in my group, there's even folks who make Java card. So, that supplies that technology is in most of the SIM cards and things like that in the world, as well as trusted execution environments. So that, I think, is really integral. And we see a lot of people doing that, right? Java is used in a lot of edge devices. What we're seeing now, though, is people are interested in having a full Java footprint of Java SE and being able to run that in smaller environments. And that's exactly the kind of thing that you can do, building a customized runtime that only has what you need in.
These days, everybody's crazy about Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. What is the relationship with Java and, when you talk about,
So that's interesting. I think that the question is, what are you using Kubernetes for? Right? So everyone talks about it as enabling technology, but typically what are they doing? Well, they're orchestrating a bunch of containers that are running, right? And what are you running in those containers? Well, a lot of people want to run Java there. And so, in fact, one of the projects that's going on in OpenJDK right now is around making sure that Java works extremely well in a Dockerized world, right? So that basically is about playing nice, using the right underlying calls in order to use resources in a way that is going to play nicely when you're running in a container. And
when we talk about containerization and everything, CICD becomes a big,
Yeah.
So Can you talk about that? What does the CI/CD pipeline looks like for the Java developers too?
Yeah, so I think this is actually something that Java developers have known and used for years, right? Many of the CI/CD tools are written in Java, and so I think that there is a pretty good tradition in the Java world of people taking advantage of those kind of techniques. In fact, it's exactly the kind of thing that we want to do more of in our development of OpenJDK. And that's back to Project SCARA and the idea of looking and running in GitHub, both for things like our developer flow, but also in building and testing.
Anything else you would like to talk about, or we have covered?
Yeah, so let me just mention a couple more things. So a few of the projects that we have going on in OpenJDK right now, they're sort of longer ranging projects. And what we've done is, with the 6-month cadence, we find ways of taking work that's being done in those projects and moving it over into a mainline release as those features are ready. Right, so rather than doing the approach of big monolithic release with lots and lots of features in it, we have these smaller windows with the projects broken down into smaller chunks. Okay? A couple of examples of these projects. We have one called Project Valhalla, which is basically looking at the way that Java objects and Java and data is modeled in memory for Java. So when Java started 20 plus years ago, you could have primitives, you could have objects, but there really wasn't anything in between. And objects are great. They're very, very powerful, but they also have a bunch of overhead associated. So what we're looking at now is something that's in between, basically is value types for Java, with the idea being that if you're willing to say my data is immutable, you're willing to give up things like subclassing, you're giving up identity, then you can actually represent that in a way that's much more natural and that works really well with underlying architecture's ability to process lots of data really, really quickly. So rather than Java objects that are spread out all over the heap and maybe have moved because the garbage collection happened, you can actually, the VM can detect that these things can be laid out in memory right next to each other, and that allows you to do things like fit them into cache lines so that optimizations can be done at the hardware level.
Exactly. So you mentioned 2 projects, SCARA and Valhalla.
Yeah.
What are the other projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so we have an ongoing project called Amber, which is working on reducing ceremony in Java, basically reducing boilerplate and making the developer's experience much easier. We also have a project called Project Loom, and that's working on support for fibers in the JVM. So this is basically taking the already great parallelism in Java to the next level. And then finally we have a project called Project Panama, and this is basically about interaction between Java and native code, and making that much more natural, much more performant, and much more secure.
Where do you find all these crazy names, Valhalla and all those? What is the story behind finding these names?
Yeah, obviously there's an art to naming, and the developers working on these projects love coming up with cool names. One thing we do try to be very careful of, though, is make sure that we use things like place names, because those can't be trademarked. We wouldn't, want to step on anyone's toes with our naming.
So let's stop talking about Java and Oracle now. Let's talk about you for a second.
Okay.
What do you do in your free time for fun? And no, you cannot go and talk about technology anymore.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I love soccer. I love playing soccer. I love watching my kids play soccer and supporting them in that. I also love sailing, and I've been lucky enough to be able to do some of that as well.
So thank you so much for talking to me today, and hopefully, we'll see you again in the next conference. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.